Hello, I'm Oliver, and this is Deep Cuts, a channel dedicated to music for lovers of music. Yep, here's another Deep Cuts Essentials video. I said a couple of weeks back when I did the Liquid Swords Essential that I was going to do another one, and here it is. As with Liquid Swords, we'll be doing another Deep Cuts Discord listening party on this album, and we'll be doing that on Tuesday, which will be tomorrow at 10 o'clock BST, so please follow the invite in the description if you want to be involved in that. So far, the listening parties we've been putting on the Discord have been so much fun, lots of people involved, so yeah, please come and join us if you haven't checked it out yet. So my sixth Deep Cuts Essential is Starsailor by Tim Buckley, a challenging, trippy, avant-garde, flavoured freak folk record. Say what? Okay, first, probably best to sketch out the background of the artist in question. Tim Buckley was a US guitarist and songwriter, born in 1947 in Washington, D.C., and then got moved to California in 1956 with his parents, where he began to discover his love of music. At school, he taught himself banjo and guitar, but during a football game, he actually broke two of his fingers, which stopped him from being able to play bar chords after that. And this accident led him to playing lots of extended chords that didn't require him to bar his fingers on the fretboard. So out of this accident, part of Tim's unique musical expression was actually born. Sometimes accidents happen for a reason. Tim's overarching musical statement was really amorphous throughout his life, fluxing from folk to folk rock, jazz, psychedelia, the more avant-garde, and this is the reason his musical styling is so individual and why Starsailor is such a fascinating record. I'm sure many of you are aware of the Buckley name largely through Tim's son Jeff. Jeff Buckley, another very talented musician who unfortunately was not long for this earth. Tim died at the age of 28 from a heroin overdose, and his son Jeff died from an accidental drowning in the Wolf River Harbor in Memphis at the age of 30. I don't think Tim has ever gotten enough credit for his songwriting style, his compositional techniques. One, the fact that he has that ability to use his voice as a stirring, spectral instrument. It makes this music so unique, especially on Starsailor. And the fact that he doesn't tether his songwriting to any kind of conventions. And again, another reason why Starsailor is such a unique listen. So the album in question, Starsailor, was Tim Buckley's sixth LP, released in 1970. Tim did go on to release three further solo LP releases before his death. One was 1972's Greetings from LA, 1973's Sophronia, and 1974's Look at the Fool. Of all of Tim's musical creations though, for me, Starsailor is the true gem. It's this exploratory, wayward, bizarre piece of work that defies convention, categorization, traditional structures. This album only lasts 36 minutes, yet in that time, no musical idea that's presented is left unexplored. It never feels like it's been left unexplored. Everything Buckley and his band does captures you as a listener and pulls you into this strange world they're creating. Speaking of the band, Buckley assembled a great roster of musicians on Starsailor, and they have a set of instruments that reveal the folkier side of this music. John Balkin playing both double bass and electric bass, Lee Underwood on the guitar, pipe organ and piano, Bunk Gardner on the tenor sax and alto flute, and Bunk Gardner was famously a performer in Frank Zappa's Mothers of Invention. And that connection to Zappa is undoubtedly there in other ways. I mean, regardless of the fact that Starsailor was actually released on Straight Records, which is Herb Cohen and Zappa's record label, there's something about Buckley's unabashed vocal experimentations that shares some of that creative DNA that Zappa was so famous for. Listen to opening track Come Here Woman, beginning with pinch harmonics and palm-muted strings that increase in tempo as cymbals cascade in the background and build this tension before Buckley's vocal line begins, which is in unison with this vampiric pipe organ. And that refrain he sings, it feels so fragmented and nasty because of the use of semitones. It just seems so unusual. Such an unusual way of opening a record. As the track picks up, this jazzy guitar line asserts itself, and you have the drums and the bass ad-libbing underneath, just as Buckley starts crooning his vocals, and he's blowing them out, collapsing them, making these melodic jumps that are so captivating because they're so unorthodox. What can't go unmentioned is Buckley's lyricism too. It's abstract, yet it's steeped in dark emotion. Just listen to these lyrics at the end of Come Here Woman. Let me drink down a little rain, man, while we're drifting cold, out beyond the seas. We wither time into a coil of fear. Very poetic, and that abstract style goes so well with the untethered instrumentation on the rest of the track. The third track, Monterey, is just brilliant. Its backbone is this repeated guitar riff, whilst Maury Baker goes to town on the drum kit, even at one point going slightly out of time. I think this happens about 1 minute in. It jars, of course, because it's out of time, but it jars in a really hypnotic way, especially alongside Tim's long-held wails that shift from melodic to dissonant. The end of the track sort of collapses just before the fade out. Tim's making these feral monkey noises, that's the only way I can describe it, and each component of the instrumentation begins to disconnect from one another just in time for that fade out. Song to the Siren is both the most straightforward track here and also one of Buckley's most famous. It was covered by John Frusciante on the Empyrean in 2009. It was covered by this Mortal Coil on their 1984 record It'll End in Tears, and Robert Plant covered it in 2002 as well. So this track has a lot of love, and it's not hard to see why. It's a stunning track. It's completely stripped back and at odds with pretty much the rest of the record. Gently distorted and phased guitar twinkles alongside Buckley's tortured vocals, and those vocals are lightly backed with his own layered vocals that evoke that sort of weightless quality. It's a really magical song, and the lyrics are less abstract here. It's a clear, forlorn love song full of sadness. I am puzzled as the oyster, I am troubled as the tide. Should I stand amid your breakers? Should I lie with death my bride? Hear me sing, swim to me, let me enfold you. Here I am, waiting to hold you. A well-placed break in this intoxicating record. I think you need a breather. It's only a 36-minute album, but even, the level of experimentation and the styles that Buckley goes through, I think it's good to have this track in it. So it's also a well-structured album in terms of its track listing. Straight into the next track, Jungle Fire. Guitar arpeggios gorgeously meandering alongside this freely expressed bass part and these sort of dense percussive flavors before 2 minutes in, the band jump into this tight, rhythmic groove. It's such a satisfying build-up, this track. Once again, Buckley sounds like a half-crazed, injured animal on this track. He's shrieking and shooting his voice across the band with these long glissandos, these vocal glissandos that create more and more dissonance and as such distance between himself and the music. Title track Starsailor is the most terrifying that Buckley gets on this record though. It's this swirling scape that surrounds his vocals, which are already heavily drowned in effects, and his lines are flexible in terms of tempo, so he drags out syllables and then all of a sudden rushes other words, and it just feels nightmarish, really nightmarish. Here are some of the lyrics though. I think it'll be quite hard to identify them in the song when you listen to them. I'm a bee out in the fields of winter, and though I memorize the slope of water, oblivion carries me on his shoulder. Beyond the suns I speak and circuits shiver, but though I shout the wisdom of the maps, I am a salmon in the ring-shaped river. The track Healing Festival continues elements from the title track, such as that horrifying vocal glissando from Buckley, but this time we have some tasty tenor sax soloing from Bunk Gardner, and then also the backline is doing this funk-laden groove once again. These pop up all the way through the album, but the funk-laden grooves are often awash with Buckley's terrifying vocals of strange, unique vocal styles and free-form expressions from different instruments at different times. This is why this album's so hard to categorize. Closing track Down by the Borderline begins with a flugelhorn solo from Buzz Gardner, that's the brother of Bunk Gardner, before this really nice guitar riff joins, and then the rest of the band join into this track. In some ways, Buckley finishes this album on a more subdued tone than the rest of the album. If you consider tracks like Starsailor and Jungle Fire, the insanity of his performances on those tracks, we don't really get that on the final track. It's almost like he's completely exhausted by his own performance. We're still getting vocal glissandos and lip rolls, but it just feels a little bit more subdued. He's letting the band do a bit more of the work towards the end because he's so exhausted. In a way, that really works as you're listening to the album, because I think as a listener, even though it's only 36 minutes, as I've already said, you do feel exhausted in some ways once you get to this final track. Gardner's soloing towards the end of the track really clashes with Lee Underwood's guitar solo. It creates such a cacophony, and then we have Buckley joining as the final band return once more to this riff before ending the song. An exhausting record in many ways. Tim Buckley was an unusual performer, an unusual songwriter, and this is an unusual album, but I mean that in the best way. This album is unique, difficult at times, challenging perhaps. It could be beautiful and glittering in one moment and completely cacophonous in the next, and it's always a ride from start to finish. And that's why it's a Deep Cuts essential. Thanks for watching. I hope you guys check this album out if you haven't heard it before. If you want to hear it along with other people in the community, come and check out the Deep Cuts Discord tomorrow at 10 o'clock, where we'll all be sitting and listening to this album and hopefully enjoying it. I think there'll be some interesting reactions to some of the tracks and some of the stylings of this record, so I look forward to talking about it. Make sure you write in the comment section what you think of this album if you have heard it before, so we can have a bit of discussion about Tim and his legacy, his other albums perhaps. But thank you for watching. I'll see you next week.